What's up everyone, I'm Joshua Botha from Zima Media and this is Ask a Marketer. In today's video, we're going to be discussing how to set up server-side tracking for a WordPress website using step.io. Now, if you're not familiar with server-side tracking, then this is when you send data that you want to track into a server that you own and that's stored in the same room as what your website is stored, and then you send it to the end destinations from there. There are a few benefits to this, such as, firstly, you own this data, that's good. And then secondly, you are going to see an increase in site speed because you don't have to send this data vast distances. Thirdly, you're going to see more accurate data. Now, if you've watched my video on the limits of Google Analytics 4, then you'll know that we aren't going to get 100% accurate data using this tracking method, but it is going to be more accurate, and that is what we are striving towards in 2024, seeing as there are a lot of laws and limitations that came into play. Now I'm going to break up this video into 4 different pieces. Firstly, we're going to touch on how to set up your Step account and what you'll need from there. Then I'll cover how to set up your web container in Google Tag Manager. Then the third thing is going to be setting up your server container in Google Tag Manager. And finally, we're going to discuss how to send this data into the end destinations. So with that said, let's dive in. As you can see, I already have my Step account open over here and I've already created a container. To do this, you can go ahead and open up the dashboard, which is what you will be greeted with once you've set up your account, and then click on Create Container over here. Then you'll need to add a name, the configuration that, from the server container, which I'll show you in a bit how to get, and then you'll need to choose a location. When it comes to the location, you want to choose a location that's closest to the traffic that comes to your website. So if you have a lot of traffic in the eastern part of the United States, then you want to go ahead and select US East, which is over here. And if you have more traffic on the western side or in a different country, then rather go ahead and add that as your location. Then you also need to make sure that your billing information has already been added. So when you open up your account for the first time, you will see that there is a button over here where I don't have it anymore because we've already added this, that asks you to actually add this billing information. You will need this to actually then go ahead and set up the container. As you can see, I've got the Pro plan for my container at the moment, and this will give me a total of 500,000 requests. Simply put, a request is when someone does any activity on your website. If they go to a different page, click on a link, fill out a form, any of these things, then it sends a request to the server, and that is how Step does their billing. So if you have a large website with a lot of traffic throughout the month, then you're going to want to get a larger plan. Next, you're going to want to make sure that you have a custom domain set up. To do this, you just need to add a subdomain to your website. So you can copy the link for your website, paste it in here, and then add anything before that that makes sense to you. I, for instance, added server over here, but you can also, for instance, add SGTM. So what this is going to do is add a subdomain for your website, and therefore it is stored in the same location. To create the subdomain itself, all you need to do is add a few DNS records to your domain hosting platform, such as SiteGround, Hostinger, Bluehost, whatever you are using to host your actual website. Once these DNS records have then been added, you can see a verify button in the bottom right corner. And if you click on this, it should almost instantly verify that the DNS records were created. And then you have your subdomain linked to your Step account. Now we want to head into the power-ups so that we can enable a few of them. The ones that we'll need is the user ID. Then we need the geo headers. The next one is going to be the user agent info. And then finally, we want to add the custom loader and cookie keeper. But before we do this, it's important to also enable the analytics. So what the analytics is going to do is allow you to see how many requests have been recovered that would otherwise be blocked by ad blockers or other tracking preventions. Then after we have enabled this, you can head back into the power-ups, and we want to go over to the custom loader, say use, tick the box. And then before we actually add anything else in here, we want to head back into the power-ups and enable the cookie keeper. Now, depending on the platforms that you're going to be sending the data to, you want to extend the cookies of those specific platforms. So I'm going to extend Step, Analytics, Google Ads, and Facebook as well. After clicking on Save Changes, you will then see that you'll need to add the same details that you saw in the custom loader. So I'm going to head into my Google Tag Manager account, and the first thing I'll need is my web container ID. So I'll right click over here, say copy, head back into my Step account and paste it over here. You also need to make sure that your domain is on the subdomain that you've set up, so that you can then send it through that subdomain. Then you want to select WordPress over here, seeing as that is what we're going to be setting it up for, and click on Generate. Here you'll be greeted with some configuration that you need to add to your website, but as you can see, they do also give you a link to a guide that you can then use. So to install the code on your website, you want to use a plugin that Step created, so that you can then just add in these few details and everything is set up for you. Let's go ahead and add this to the website. So I'll head into my WordPress backend over here, and as you can see, I already have the plugin installed, but if you would like to then install it, you can head over to Plugins, click on Add New Plugin, and then search for GTM Server Side. You'll notice that it has the same logo as Step, so it should be very easy to identify. Then you can simply click on Install and then activate it once it's ready. Then once you have activated it, you can head into the settings, and here you will find the GTM server-side plugin directly beneath it. Great. Now you will notice that there are a few things that we need to add over here. Firstly, you want to ensure that it is going to embed the code on your website, so you can leave that active. Then head back into Step, grab the Google Tag Manager web ID and paste it in here. Then we're going to grab this container load path over here, and then finally we're going to grab the container identifier and add it in there. Then we also want to tick both of these boxes, seeing as we are using Step Analytics and we are using the cookie keeper, so we can then go ahead and click on Save Changes, and that is basically it. It will now embed the code on your website, and your Google Tag Manager will then start receiving data, which is great. So we have our Step set up, and it's time to move on to what to do in the web container inside of Google Tag Manager. All right, so let's take a look at what we need to set up inside of the web Google Tag Manager container. There are a few things that you will notice over here. First of all, we need to touch on the variables, triggers, and tags, and then we also need to discuss how to enrich the data that you're going to be sending. So in simple terms, your variables are what you are going to use to get data to the tags and then send it to the server. So these are things such as the page URL that the user is on at that moment. Then we also have other variables such as the form email and the form ID. Overall, we also use them to then store our Google Analytics 4 and Google Ads IDs, so it's easier for us to use it in our tags and triggers. Then moving on to the triggers, these are what you're going to use to actually trigger the tags that you want to send. So say for instance we want a form submission, then over here in the form submit trigger we can see that it will trigger when the data layer receives a form submit event, and then we can also add in a few additional conditions such as it has to be on a specific page URL and it needs to have this specific form ID. Another one as an example is for instance the contact page. So here we're going to use a page view trigger, and then we also add in a condition that it's only the contact page that we want to track. Then moving on to the tags, we use these to then actually send the data to the end destination. So a tag is where everything comes together. And for instance, for the call click tag, you can see that here is the name of the event that I'm going to be sending to Google Analytics 4. And you can also see that here is the trigger that I've then created to specify that when this action happens, it needs to trigger this tag, and then that will send to the server, and from the server it will send to the end destination. All right, so now that we have the basics of what these are, we can proceed to actually set them up. So for the server-side tracking, we only need to actually set up the Google Analytics 4 tags. And as you can see, I have everything templated. So I have a whole bunch of options that I can choose from. So for instance, if the user is using contact form 7, then I'll be using this tag. If they're using Elementor, then I can use that one. A normal form, I'll be using this one. And then finally, WP forms I have over here. There are many different form builders, and each of them send a different event to the data layer when someone actually submits it. So it is important to understand how those forms work. But the easiest way to see what you are going to get on the form submission side is to preview what you receive when you go through the website. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a few small details that I need for my triggers and tags. And once this is done, then we can go ahead and preview and see what we receive when we submit the form.
A few moments later.
And there you go. So I've adjusted my triggers and variables, and I'm ready to now preview what I'm going to receive when I submit a form on the website. One thing to take note of is that it's always best to add your Google Analytics ID into your tags before you go ahead and preview, because there are certain types of data layer events that only trigger once the Google Analytics 4 ID is already on the tag. To do this, you'll simply need to head into your Google Analytics account and then head into the admin over here. Then you can head over to data streams, click on the stream that you've created, and finally copy the measurement ID over here. Then you can head back into your Google Tag Manager account and click on the tags. And over here at the top of each tag, you'll notice that there is a section for measurement ID. Now, seeing as I use variables for this instead, I'm going to head into the variable and then click on the Google Analytics 4 ID variable and paste it in there. What's great about using the variable method is in future, if I want to add another tag, then I can simply make a copy of one of the tags, and I already have my Google Analytics 4 ID in there because it's saved inside of a variable safely. Great, so let's go ahead and click on preview. And I'm going to then paste the URL of this website. I like adding in the UTM parameters so that I can identify the source when it comes through. So let's go ahead and do that. There you go. So I've got my website open, and if I head into my preview or debugger, then you're going to notice that the first time around it might not actually load because it's the first time that the tag is triggering on the website. To fix this, you simply just need to refresh the debugger, add in your URL once again, and then click on connect, and it's going to just refresh the website over here. If you head back into the debugger, this time you'll see that the data actually comes through. Okay, fantastic. So let's go ahead and just click around on a few things to make sure that everything is working. So I'll head into one of the solutions, and here it's going to then open up a new page. And with a container loaded, which is where the page view events are stored, I'm going to see that my view item is working, so that's great. Then I can head into the contact page, because the main thing that we want to test on this first preview is what we receive when we submit the contact form. So let's head over to the contact form. Then we're going to add in a few details. Zimamedia.com and test. So let's go ahead and click on send message. I can see that the submission was a success, so I'll head back into the debugger, and here I'll see my form submit event. Now, every now and then, depending on the form builder that you're using, you might not see the form submit event come through, and often this is simply because of some of the settings that you have inside of your Google Analytics account. So to ensure that this should work, you can head back into your data streams over here, and then under the enhanced measurement, you just want to click on the cog and ensure that the form interactions is set to active. If this is inactive, then often it won't actually send the form submit event through. All right, so now that we have our form submit event and we can see that it is working, we can take a look at what we're going to use to identify this form so that when this specific form is submitted, then it will create or send that event. So I have event model, and then I've got a form ID of contact form. So I'll copy the event model, then head back into my Google Tag Manager itself, head to variables, and I need to create a data layer variable so that I can then identify the form. So we'll go ahead and click on data layer variable, then I'll paste event model, add a period or a dot so that you can signify that you're heading into this bracket, and then we're going to say form submit. There you go. And just like that, now I will be able to tell them that the event in the event model dot form submit, I need to have contact form, and this way this is how we can then identify that this specific form is going to be submitted. So I'll now copy the contact form, and I'll just need to save this. I often add data layer variable. Let me just copy and paste this over here so that I know what that variable is. Now I want to head into my triggers and head over to my contact form trigger. So now I can see that the event name is form submit because that is the event name that we have over here. And then I need to go and select that new data layer variable that we've created. So if I head into here, it is around here somewhere. Let me just grab it. There you go. Event model form ID. And then I want contact form, which is already there, and I can then go ahead and click save. Now I can head back into my tags and unpause the tag that's going to be using that specific trigger. And then in addition to this, I also want to set up enhanced conversions. So simply put, enhanced conversions is when you send personal data of a user when they give it to you to Google Ads or Google Analytics to help them better match these users in the future. In this case, because it is a contact form that's being submitted, they are providing you with their email address, so you're allowed to then send this data to Google Analytics or Google Ads. And to get that data, you need to create a user-provided data variable. So we'll head into the variables, and as you can see, I already have a few of them set up. Now I like to use the manual configuration method. In this case, I will manually find this email address using another variable that I've created and then send it through with the form submission. The reason why I like to do this is because I can then also grab the phone number. If you're not familiar with coding or anything along those lines, then you can rather go ahead and use the automatic collection. And here it will try to find the personal data such as the email address and send it through with the contact form, but you don't have a guarantee that this will always work. Often you'll also only get the email address and not the phone number or any other information. So with the manual configuration method, this is how I go ahead and do it. So in here I have a custom JavaScript variable that just has an open function, and all it's going to do is look for a selector that has a specific ID and then give me the value. All we need to do is go into the form, right click on the email field, and I'm going to inspect. Then I'm going to copy the selector of that input field and head back into my Google Tag Manager and then paste that selector. So as you can see, it's now giving me the field ID, which is over here. There's ID, form field email, and it just adds the hash in front because that's how it then identifies that it's an ID. So I'll go ahead and click on save. Now I want to do the same for the phone field. So I'm going to head back into the website and just go ahead and select the specific form field. Then I'll once again grab the selector, head back into my Google Tag Manager and paste it inside of the phone JavaScript. So I'll go ahead and save that. Then I'll double check that it is being referenced inside of my user provided data variable. Here it is. So there's the custom JavaScript for the phone and there's one for the email. I'll head back into my tags. then make sure that it is actually being added to the tag. So once you open up your tags, you'll see that there is a section where you can include user provided data from your website, and then you just need to select that user provided data variable. Okay, great. So everything is set up. Now I want to preview this again and make sure that it is working. So I'll head back into the website. There you go. I can see that my debugger is working. Now I can close the inspect and go to contact. There you go. So my contact page is opened. I can see that it is working inside of the debugger. And I just want to head down to the contact form and resubmit it using the same details. So there's the email and the phone, and I am going to send message. The submission was successful. I'm going to head back into my debugger. Here's the form submit event. Here's the new tag that's now fired, seeing as the trigger has been fixed. And I also have the user data, which is the email and the phone number as we set it up. So this is all great. Now I'm going to go ahead and just change a few more details inside of my Google Tag Manager account. But overall, that is the most basic part of your web container that you need to set up. Seeing as with WordPress, you most of the time just want to track the form as that is your most important event. Now there are of course other types of events such as the Calendly, which needs to be tracked in an entirely different way. To do this, you'll often need to have a code snippet on the website that listens for events that get sent when actions are taken on the calendar itself. So I have this snippet over here that also gets fired on all pages. Whenever there is a calendar on the website, then it's going to send these calendar updates where it says, for instance, here that the event was viewed, the date and time was selected, and finally the form was submitted. So these are the Calendly events that you need to also then set up if you are using Calendly. But overall, I'm not going to be touching too much on that in this video. Instead, I just wanted to mention that you want to ensure that you also track the user journey, such as the core clicks, the contact page views, the service page views, and so forth, because it is important to have an overview of what the users are doing on the website. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and just make a few more adjustments, and then we can move on to what to do in the server container on the website. So I'll see you soon. Okay, fantastic. So I've made a few adjustments to my overall setup. I removed any unnecessary tags and cleaned up the account overall. But there is one more thing that I wanted to mention. So when you have a contact form or a newsletter subscribe event, then you want to ensure that it only fires once per page. The reason why I say this is because at times you may actually see multiple form submit events come through for the same form submission. And then if it's not set to once per page, it's going to fire each time that that event triggers. And this is not something we want, because this is going to inflate the numbers when they aren't actually true. So instead of firing it once per event, you can head into the tag, then you scroll down and you'll see that here is tag firing options. And in here, you want to just set it to once per page instead of once per event. And this way, when someone submits a form and it triggers multiple form submissions, it only fires it on the first one, and therefore you won't be inflating these numbers. Okay, great. Now moving on to what we need for the server side container. The first thing that you'll need to do is set up your server container URL. So to do that, you need to head into your web containers GA4 tag, and then you want to just ensure that you have this configuration parameter over here. And then you need to paste the step container URL over here. So this is the server URL that we set up earlier where we needed to verify it. So as you can see, I've now go ahead and copy that URL, and you can paste it directly into this GA4 tag. But once again, I am using a variable for this. So I'll head over to the variables. Then I'm going to search for my step container URL. There you go. And just paste this URL in there. Now, if I click save, it's going to, from now on, send everything through that URL instead of sending it directly to GA4. So now we need to head into our server container. Over here, as you can see, I have my server container open. Now, before heading into the different aspects of the server container, we want to actually head into the admin. And then we need to head into the container settings. So in here, you'll notice that there is a section where you need to add this URL once again. So I'm just going to paste that URL and then click on save. And now we can head into our server container and continue with the setup. Now you'll notice that there are a few things different from the server container and the web container. The first thing that you'll notice is that you now have clients and transformations. Now the clients and transformations aren't as challenging as you may think. Simply put, a client is what you use to receive the data from somewhere. So for instance, I have a client for GA4 and the web container client, and these are both to help receive data from our web container. So all I need to do in here is click on the client. Then I want to, first of all, ensure that the region-specific settings are enabled. So to do this, we'll need to create a new variable. Then you'll see that it has already opened up the configuration over here. And all we need to do is name this visitor region. And just like that, we have our visitor region variable set up, and we can just go ahead and click on save. Next, we need to also add a measurement ID. So in here, I already have my variable once again. So I'm just going to select my Google Analytics 4 ID over there and then click on save, and everything is good. If you would like, you can also set a priority. The higher the number, the more it's going to prioritize firing this client first, but it's not a necessity. Now I can head into the web container client, and I'm going to just add the same settings. So first of all, you can see that I have the web container ID variable once again over here as well. But all that this is this ID over here. So you can go ahead and copy that and then paste it in here directly. Or as you can see, I'm using a variable, so I'm going to paste it in the variable instead. Now I also want to enable the region specific settings over here and just select that same visitor region variable that I created. Great. So now let's head into the variables and just add in those few variables that we require. First of all, I have the web container ID, which I need to paste in there. Now I need to once again grab my Google Analytics 4 ID. So let's go in here and we just copy it over here. And paste it. And then once we have set up the tags and we know that they're working correctly, we can go ahead and add the Google Ads ID as well, if you're going to be sending the data to Google Ads as well. So now heading into the triggers and tags, you'll notice that there are a few differences when it comes to how the triggers and tags work. Whenever you send something to a server container, it's going to be received by one of the clients that we mentioned earlier. And there are other ways of doing this. What makes this great is that you can add webhooks, for instance. So you can have a client that receives a webhook from a certain URL, and you can send data to that webhook URL, and it will be received inside of the server container. But we don't have to go into so much detail. Instead, all we need to actually know is how the GA4 client works. So we need to set up a few triggers. The first one is going to be the one that's going to be used for your entire GA4. And all that this essentially needs is the client name. And that should be a built-in variable that you can select. So you can go ahead and make a client name and then contains GA4. And that way, anything that gets received from the web container that is sent to the GA4 client is going to be received and forwarded directly to Google Analytics 4. So it's very simple. You only have one tag in the server container that handles all of your GA4 data. Now we also need to set up the custom event triggers, and these are going to be for your other destinations such as Google Ads, Meta, and so forth. So in here, you can select to either have a custom event the same way that we have it in the web container, and you can just have the same client name, or you can have it set up so that if it has the client name GA4 and the custom and the event name is, for instance, call click, then send it to that destination. Both methods will work because you're not going to be receiving any other data from any other clients. So by setting up a custom event, you are by default essentially saying that anything that comes from GA4 that has this as an event name, please forward it to that destination. We currently only have the GA4 client, so there's no need to specify that only the GA4 client events should come through, because all events that are coming into the server container are going to be from GA4. So there's no need to actually specify that now. All right, heading into the tags, we can now take a look. First of all, we also need to add the conversion linker over here. So if you are sending it to Google Ads, you need this conversion linker tag, because that's going to link your tags together. And then you can set up your Google Ads tags over here, which will then send to Google Ads directly. Now it's very simple. You're going to just have your conversion ID and your conversion label, which you receive when you create the events in Google Ads. And then you have your value and your currency code, which is only for specific events, normally purchase event. Apart from that, you can also add in product level sales data, but we are not going to be doing that, seeing as we have a lead-based website. So for now, all that I actually want to take a look at is the server side tag. So this, as I mentioned, is your GA4 tag. It's going to be handling all of the requests that come into your account and then send that directly to Google Analytics 4 just through the server, so that you get all those benefits that we discussed. As you can see, I just have the measurement ID with my variable. You can once again paste it directly in here if you'd like. And then you have as your event name, the event name variable. So once again, this is added to the account by default. But if it isn't there, then you can go ahead and just add the plus icon, and you need to click on built-ins, and here it will give you event name at the top. So you can then activate that and then use this as your variable. So any event that gets sent, it will just grab the event name and forward it through to Google Analytics 4. And then you want to have that trigger that says any event that has the client name GA4 needs to then be sent to GA4. Okay, great. So I didn't actually make any changes. Let's discard this. And then I'm going to now preview if I'm actually receiving any data. So I'll click on preview. Now you need to have your web container and your server container open at the same time to actually preview this, because all that the server container is going to do is open up that subdomain that you've created, and it's going to add a few parameters so that you can then use the debugger. And now we have to head back into our web container and click on preview over here. Once this opens up, we can then go ahead and run a few tests. So I'm going to head over to the contact page once again. As you can see, it did already fire. So if I head into my server container debugger, then I'm going to start seeing events come through. So there's a page view event, for instance, there's a user engagement, page view, and contact page. And this is one of the events that I have set up to go through to Google Ads. So this is one that has a custom event trigger, but as you can see, the page view event has the server side tag for Google Analytics 4. So does the user engagement and the other page view, the contact page, all of them, because the client is called GA4, and that is the one that we set up just as we entered into the server container account. Okay, fantastic. So everything seems to be working. I can go ahead and also test a few of the other events. I have set up my Calendly, so I'm going to just go ahead and select a date over here and a time. Now that will trigger a specific date and time event that I've created. And I'm not going to submit this right now because I don't need to actually book the call, because I have tested this extensively on the web container side already. And I'm going to go ahead and complete the form as well, so that we can test whether we are receiving the email and phone number inside of the server container. So I'll go ahead and click on send message. Here it's been successful, and there's my form submit event. I also see all of my Calendly events, as I mentioned, that will then go through. And I'm going to head into my server container. Here I'll have my Calendly select day event that's been triggered. This is going to be forwarded to Google Analytics 4, as I mentioned, so I can see that when someone then selects a day and time on my Calendly. And then I also have my contact form event, which is the one that I want to prioritize because I want users to actually fill out the form on my site. And there's one thing that you will notice that's different from the rest of the events. So if I head into, for instance, the contact page event, head over to event data, then here you can see a lot of information. You can see which browser I'm using. You can see what my IP address is, what my user agent is, which page I'm on, what my previous page was, and so forth. So overall, there is a lot of information inside of the event data, and it does continue as you go down. Now, heading into the contact form event, you'll notice that it adds the user data event data, and that is what I want because I want to ensure that this email and the phone is being forwarded to Google Analytics 4 and all the other destinations that I'm setting up inside of my server container. And that's basically it. You have everything set up, and the last thing to do is then go ahead and submit this on the server container as well as the web container, and then you can go ahead and test it inside of Google Analytics. So to test it inside of Google Analytics, all you want to do is head into the reports over here. Then you want to go into your real-time overview, and in here you'll see that there are the events that you're busy triggering. So there's my currently select day, here's my page views, there's my user engagement, and as time goes on, it's going to start sending the rest of the events such as the contact form. But overall, Google Analytics 4 does take some time to actually receive all of this data. So don't be worried if you don't see it inside of the real-time report right now. The best way to actually test whether it is working is the next day, on at least 24 hours later. You can head into the admin section. Then you want to navigate to the events section under data display. And in here, you will then see all of those events pop up. So you'll have your contact form, you'll have your view item, your newsletter form, and whatever else you would like to track. Once this has then been added to here, all you need to do is add them as main events, those that you want to, for instance, send to Google Ads or any other destinations. And you'll need to then just configure your Google Analytics 4 account itself and link it to your other Google accounts. Now, there is one more thing that I want to go over with you, and that is how to set up your tags and events for Google Ads specifically. Now, you'll notice that I only set up that one event inside of the web container, which is for the phone call. But inside of my server container, I'm going to be setting up all of my events and then sending them directly to Google Ads. The reason why I do this is because when it goes through to Google Analytics 4 first, you tend to lose data, and this we don't want. So instead, you want to send it directly from your server container into your Google Ads account, and from there, you should have a lot more accurate data. So to actually add this link between Google Ads and your server container, you simply need to head into your Google Ads account and click on Create Conversion Actions. Then we click on Website, and we just add in the URL. Once it's then finished scanning, you can go ahead and select Add Conversion Action manually. In here, you'll need to add the section or category that you would like to use. I would like to have this as my primary because it's going to be the contact form. I'd like to name it something along the lines of this, and then always add the source that it came from. So I have Google Tag Manager in this case. And then this is not going to have any value. I only want to have it count one time, and it's going to be 90 days so that I have as much data as possible. You also want to ensure that the enhanced conversions is enabled over here, and then you can click on Done. Now I'm going to go ahead and create each of these events inside of my Google Ads account, and then we can take it from there on how to finally then link those to each other. So I'll see you soon.
A few minutes later.
And there you go. So I have all of my events set up inside of my Google Ads account. So I'm going to click on Save and Continue. And in here, you'll see that there is an option to use Google Tag Manager. Now we want to copy this conversion ID. I'm going to head back into my server container and just paste it in that variable. But I will be showing you how to add it to the tag as well. So in here, I paste the variable or the ID, and then I'm going to head into the tags. Now you can add that conversion ID directly in here, but once again, I'm using a variable because that way I don't need to add it individually for each of them. I can just paste it once and it's done. and then head back into your Google Ads and just copy the conversion labels. So you have your contact form conversion label over here, and I'm going to head back into my server container and then look for contact form. I'm going to paste it over here on the second field and save. Now you repeat this for each of your Google Ads events, and just like that, it's going to forward this all into your Google Ads as well when someone came from Google Ads. So it is going to do the tracking on its side because it's going to pick up on certain identifiers such as the G-code, but overall you want to just ensure that it is being sent directly from Google Tag Manager. It's much easier and much more accurate. And that's it from me. So if you found this helpful, then please do remember to like the video and also subscribe to our channel so that you can get more content like this. Have a great day. Bye.